Budget night is less than a month away, and there has been a lot of speculation about what might be contained in this year's budget that will affect superannuation. Grant Abbott from NowInfinity, the principal of NowInfinity, has joined me today to talk about some of the ideas that have been discussed as to what might be contained in the budget. Welcome, Grant.
How are you, Darren?
I'm very well, thank you. Look, one of the more bizarre things that have come up in the last few weeks has been a suggestion that the government may be favouring a reduction in the concessional contributions caps to $20,000. Would they seriously do that, and what sort of implications does this have?
A couple of things. Well, we're getting quite a lot of our advisors, part of the NowInfinity group, they're getting clients who want to put in their 35 because they're over 50 because they're worried about that cap coming in. Yeah. I'm also chairman of the SMSF Members Association. We had a written letter from Tony Abbott last election. They weren't going to bring in any new taxes or anything detrimental around super, and to date they haven't done anything. And notwithstanding, I think we had a discussion before about Abbott leaving. Does that mean that's off the table? I would find it very difficult with it. Well, I think John Howard would wring someone's neck if he could see that the whole idea about an election, particularly if we're going to a double dissolution, so it means whatever you promise, it doesn't matter whether it's going to happen or not, because the bills can't get through the budgetary. So it's virtually, it's going to make no sense, because what you're doing is really, what comes out in the budget is more of an election tool. And so from that perspective, I'm not sure that they'll drop down those caps. It seems to me to be crazy, because, you know, if someone's on $150,000 or $180,000, that by the time you put 9% or 10% over it, you know, there's not much left for voluntary saving, which it just doesn't. I don't think it's right from, you know, the guys like Peter Costello who bought us all this tax-free super, no RBLs, and then said, well, what we'll do is you give all this, but there's a reduction in the caps. And at the end of the day, seriously, how many people put in more salary sacrifice above the caps? What would they actually earn out of it? And to me, if you did that adjustment and the systems you'd have to build in place, I just don't think they're going to make the money out of it.
Now, I know that that is pure speculation, but and you've obviously flagged that some of the members of the SMSF Members Association are considering making more contributions just in case. Is it a prudent strategy to just do that in case?
I think, I don't know, people always say that. You've never seen huge amounts on budget night. You know, go back to 2007. I remember being in London at the time, and then Costello comes out and gives all these amazing things, you know, where there's always doom and gloom before. As I said, I don't think with an election in the offing that they're really going to be out there very strongly. And it looks as though the government's a bit in turmoil anyway, so I think that whole tax thing that they were going to look at, I reckon it's going to fall by the wayside. So
taxing people in the drawdown phase always comes up at this time of the year. Do you think there's any realistic possibility of them looking at that?
Again, we can go back to where Costello was, or we should go pre-Costello. One of the elements there is obviously the accumulation account was taxed at 15%, or you'd have a discount on your capital gains tax. And then once Costello introduced the fact that you had tax-free super coming out, you see, what happened before is you'd have your pension income was tax-free, because once you took that income, it was assessable, but you got a 15% tax rebate. So the whole precept there is that if you taxed inside the pension side and then took it out as ordinary income, as taxed again at your marginal tax rate, that's 15% rebate as well. Hold on, that's double taxation, which they got rid of when you think the old company rules, they got rid of imputation. They said, well, you know, you get imputed credit. So that made sense. What's transpired technically from a tax perspective, and I don't want anyone to argue efficiency or equity, but what's happened is we've got tax-free super after age 60 and tax-free super inside age 60, which at the end of the day means that Australia is effectively a tax haven although I didn't see that in the Panama Papers, but Australia's a tax haven for retirees, and it is. You can see a lot of English people coming and living here because they've got tax-free inside their super fund, and then also tax-free out. So it was always argued, the Henry report said, well, what we should do is have a flat rate of tax. The hard thing is if you came out and just said, look, it's 15% across the board, everyone would scream. Or more importantly, again, you have a look at the budgetary, they can't do it for existing pension members. If they go back to, like, if you remember 1988, when super funds were tax-free, what they did is they grandfathered all the existing assets in there at that time. So they gave them the mark-to-market or the market value for CGT assets. Income accrued up to that date was A-OK. So I would say that probably it's always on the cards, but the rate that they choose, for example, Henry, I think, came down and said around about 7 or 8%, which should be A-OK, but that means then they're chopping off a lot of revenue at that front end, being the contributions, taxes and all that. The other ones that obviously always comes up, the hoary chestnut, which is, well, we'll tax contributions at marginal tax rates. And it's like, well, that doesn't wear with me in that you are forced to make super, you're forced not to take salary, and then you're going to find it's taxing your marginal tax rate. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, speaking of marginal tax rate and contributions on the way in, another idea that's been sort of mooted is a flat 15% rebate across the board. What do you think of that?
Yeah, look, I think again, there's a lot of this stuff and people throwing all these things up. And I can assure you, I don't know, but certainly from the SMSF Members Association, none of our guys want anything to do with it. They just keep on saying to us, and we've got a whole list of stuff that we gave to Barnaby Joyce when he came and presented at the SMSF Members Association conference, that effectively don't touch our super. And you have to understand, a lot of these people have invested a long time being self-funded retirees, to then have the gates or the field change or the goals changed when you're 60 or 75 or 80. It's the same thing. Can you imagine that we put money or salary sacrifice in now or whatever, and then when we're 70, the government says, oh, by the way, all salary sacrifice contributions are going to be taxing your marginal tax rate on the way out. It's just not fair. There has to be a playing field that you're in, then it's grandfathered, and then you move on from there.
Yeah. We've just talked about just a few things that have been thrown up there, but are there any other things that you're potentially going to be looking out for on May 3?
Look, I don't think that there's anything to a great extent. I certainly know there's probably a recognition the longevity issue is obviously a concern. I know Challenger has put that up quite an extent. Whether they're annuity products are the fit in there. I think that there's not enough income products out there, particularly around the SMSF space. So if there's an encouragement for the government, I know for the SMSF Members Association, we've been pushing, particularly in the election year, for the government to have infrastructure bonds. I mean, they talk about this infrastructure, but a lot of our members would love to have a lifetime bond that is guaranteed by the government. And that would suit everyone, and that would mean you're virtually getting an annuity, and it's giving back to Australia. So we'd like to see that on the positive side, and not try to take pot shots at SMSFs, but actually understand that we invest 99% of our assets inside Australia, how we can best use that money inside Australia. So that's probably a more positive way. But going back to what I was saying is, the easiest one would be like the reduction of the cap. I think everyone would have, be quelle horreur, if that happened. You feel as though you're over in, over in France, like some socialist country for that one. But I think for us I think it's just going to be, it's too close to election. They're just going to keep it pretty soft. And hopefully it'll be great to see them give us some incentives for SMSFs to make productive investments in infrastructure, regional, and also the first home buyer crisis. I think that's where our money should be better spent, rather than trying to nip and tuck it, because you're never going to make much revenue out of it anyway.
In your interaction with this sector, both through NowInfinity and also the SMSF Members Association, what sort of effect are are all these sort of speculative changes having on confidence in the system?
Well, again, we survey our members, and I think before the last conference we said Barnaby Joyce is coming. They're very vociferous. So we don't do the typical survey, yes, no, whatever. It's just like, well, spill the beans, tell us what you like, and you end up with this 3-paragraph diatribe about blah 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 blah, which is great because they're engaged, which the industry and retail funds aren't. And I think that's Jeremy Cooper said perhaps SMSFs are the way to go down the track, and we're starting to see that. But it does, like everything. I've been in tax for a long time. It's always going to be shifting sands, and all I can say is at the moment it's as good as it gets in terms of self-managed. There will be changes, maybe not now, but they have to be down the track. The other big one is going to be the aged care crisis that I've seen personally. I can tell you that is going to be an absolute, in the next 15, 20 years, that's going to be an absolute nightmare to find enough nursing home places, particularly with dementia, the baby boomers coming through, which are twice the size of the former silent generation. So they're the issues that we're going to have to look at. And the government is going to be scrapping everywhere to get the money. Really, probably the best thing out of the whole lot from a pure tax efficiency point of view would have been the idea of increasing the GST. It's a lot easier way of pulling money, perhaps make extension. But again, it's politically probably not unpalatable, although I do like the South Australian Premier, who's Labor person, he said, well, this is the way is potentially there. So, at least those debates are on the thing. I don't think tweaking around superannuation or self-managed or doing this is really going to make a huge difference. You're going to take really big choices like that.
Okay, thanks very much for your time today, Grant.
Okay, thank you.